Good afternoon, everybody. For some reason, the PDF file that I gave you guys, the words were cut off. So you can listen to your homework here, and so you don't get confused on what to read. World War II, Prelude to War, Europe. In 1919, after 5 years of conflict, few could imagine that in 20 short years, Europe would once again be at war. The results of the Great War were everywhere. Starving refugees, smashed towns, disfigured and crippled soldiers, and gashed fields filled with half-buried dead. But the defeat of Germany in World War I had left many questions unanswered. Powerful national interests and strong ideologies were still brewing discontent throughout Europe and Asia. Changes in Germany. The Treaty of Versailles had stripped Germany's military of soldiers and weapons. A democratic Weimar government had replaced the German Kaiser. The treaty had also scissored away a quarter of German territory and dissolved the empires that had once been Germany's allies. Moreover, the Allies were forcing Germany to pay reparations for civilian property destroyed during the war. To the Allies, these payments seemed fair because, in their view, Germany had started World War I. Yet other provisions to the treaty limited Germany's ability to produce goods and sell them. The country's ability to make money in the world market was partially cut off. Germany had no real way of getting the cash it needed to make reparation payments. As the German economy shrank, Germans bristled at the unfairness of this situation. Germany had no tradition of real democracy. The democratic regime that had took over after the war was finalized and faced many enemies. The Russian Revolution had popularized the idea of communism. Some supported this idea for Germany. Other Germans wanted to return their country to its old traditions. They wanted the Kaiser, Germany's old ruler, to return from exile and rule Germany as before. The democratic Weimar government was trying to make Germany stable, but it faced some of the bleak financial prospects Germany had ever known. The prospects grew even bleaker when the Great Depression began in the United States, and bleaker when the financial markets collapsed around the world. Avoiding paying reparations, German currency was devalued severely. Eventually, it took millions of marks, German units of currency, to buy a loaf of bread. Revolts around the world. Germany wasn't the only country in crisis. Revolution and dissent erupted throughout Eastern Europe and Asia. Discontent after the Great War sparked a search for new leadership. Across the world, many looked to the bold new worker state being advanced in communist Russia, although few realized how brutal it would become. Other countries struggling to find security after the ashes of the war clung to ultra-nationalistic ideals, especially fascism. Fascism on the rise. The idea of fascism had started in Italy during the early 1920s. Fascism saw the state as the ultimate power. Individuals only had worth if they served the state. Fascists were anti-democratic. They believed in controlling society and completely squashing opposition. During the late 1920s and 1930s, fascists gained power in many European countries, including Portugal, Croatia, Romania, Hungary, Spain, Italy, and Germany. There were small fascist parties in Britain, France, and Poland. Though fascism made harsh demands, it seemed to many to offer a cure for the frightening chaos that had altered Europe after World War I. Millions of Europeans lost work, food, and clothing. As conditions grew worse, they became willing to trade freedoms for a steady job or bread to eat. For many, willing or unable to serve. The Nazis gained power. The Nationalist Socialist Party had been gaining support in Germany since the end of the 1920s. Though it claimed to support the rights of the workers, the party was strictly fascist. Its leader, Adolf Hitler, was a persuasive speaker and powerful manipulator. Throughout the 1920s, he, along with other Nazis, preached the doctrines of National Socialism to anyone who would listen. Like Hitler himself, many of the first Nazis were bitter soldiers from World War I. They blamed their defeat on communists and German Jews. They belittled democracy, which they identified with weakness and defeat. Though it had few members at first, the Nazi party slowly gained strength in Germany. Nazi stormtroopers, uniformed strongmen, intimidated and attacked their opponents openly in the streets. Meanwhile, Hitler courted powerful allies in the army and in industry. In 1932, the Nazis wielded considerable power in the German parliament, called Reichstag. But that was not what Hitler wanted. He had openly stated that he wished to crush a now weakened Weimar government. He scorned the whole idea of democracy and advised Nazi deputies to hold their noses while in the Reichstag. Hitler wanted absolute power, but he wanted to get it legally. At the end of January 1933, he got his chance. With another crisis in the government, German President Paul von Hindenburg was forced to appoint a new chancellor. Because of the Nazis' powerful position, he had no real choice but to name Hitler. Hindenburg, as well as other leaders of the Reichstag, believed they could keep Hitler under control. They were wrong. Hitler was determined to take total control of the government. To do this, he would have to destroy the German constitution and abolish the civil rights it guaranteed to the people of Germany. Hitler needed an excuse to declare an emergency to suspend the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. On the night of February 27, 1933, he got his opportunity when the Reichstag building was set on fire. Many suspected that the fire had been set by the Nazis, but a Dutchman was charged. President von Hindenburg signed an emergency decree suspending civil rights. Nazis take control. Given a free hand by the decree, Hitler's aides terrorized Nazi opponents throughout much of Germany. In the next election, the Nazis polled over 17 million votes, more than any other party, but again Hitler and his party did not win enough votes to gain a clear majority. More importantly, Hitler needed a full two-thirds majority to change the Constitution, so he proceeded to change the percentages in his favor. Though 81 communist deputies had been elected, those seats went empty when the Reichstag opened. When most of the deputies had been arrested by the secret police, the rest were running for their lives. The German Centre Party was all that stood between Hitler and dictatorship. On March 23rd, these deputies threw in their lot with Hitler. This allowed him to disband the Constitution. The Nazis now began to take total control of Germany. The government, workers' unions, radio, and press all were under Hitler's iron hand. Aggression in Europe. Italy's fascist government was led by Benito Mussolini, nicknamed Il Duce by Italian admirers. Mussolini set the standard for fascist aggression that would become a staple in the world war to come. In 1935, Mussolini's troops marched into the tiny Ethiopian nation in East Africa. The Italians terror-bombed small towns to crush the country's morale. Ethiopia's democratic allies, including Britain and France, ignored repeated pleas from Ethiopia's leader, Haile Selassie, for help. Large anti-Jewish riots spilled through the French streets in 1934. Fascist groups there, particularly the Croix de Feu, used riots in an attempt to bring down the French democracy. In 1936, after battling fierce demonstrations and street fights, the French government banned the Croix de Feu and other fascist parties. In Spain, the conflicts between Republican and Communists and Nationalists exploded into a gruesome civil war. In 1931, Spain's king, Alphonse the 13th, was disposed by Republican pro-communist forces. In 1936, a fascist general, Francisco Franco, led a force that captured much of southern Spain and laid siege in its capital, Madrid. Germany and Italy were interested in the successes that follow fascists. They sent military supplies and their pilots terror-bombed Spanish towns. The Soviet Union sent aid to the pro-communist Republicans. They were also helped by the International Brigade, volunteers from around the world. Many of these soldiers were not communists, but they were willing to stake their lives in the fight against fascism. The writer Ernest Hemingway and thousands of other Americans served in the war. In one battle, the Abraham Lincoln Brigade attacked fascist troops as they laid siege to Madrid. More than 400 U.S. volunteers were wounded or killed in heavy fighting.